gonna drink together at 9 to celebrate something at work tomorrow.
Okay. And then what alerted you to him today, right now?
When I just woke up, I always, when I sleep with my kids, I'll wake up and I go back in my own bed.
Mm-hmm.
I just crawled over on his side.
And he was laying in bed?
Mom.
What's going on?
I don't know, something's wrong with Eric. The police have girls are here. I don't know what's happening. He wasn't breathing. I don't know.
Who?
Eric.
Where's he at?
He's at my house. He's at my house. Can you go away?
I'm on my way.
On February 23rd, 2026, a Utah mother who once positioned herself as a guide through heartbreak faces the question a jury can't ignore. Did she create the grief she later sold to the public? Prosecutors say Eric Richins died at home on March 4th, 2022, with about 5 times the lethal amount of fentanyl in his system. They allege the fentanyl wasn't a tragic accident. It was delivered to him in a drink after an earlier test run that didn't finish the job. Because here's the twist that makes people's stomachs drop. After Eric's death, Kouri Richins self-published a children's book about grief, Are You With Me? And promoted herself publicly as the mom helping her kids heal. But investigators say the healing narrative may have been a shield. The state's timeline alleges a first attempt around Valentine's Day 2022. A sandwich they say was laced with fentanyl and that Eric survived. Then, weeks later, prosecutors say she served a drink, sometimes described in coverage as a cocktail, with the fatal dose, and prosecutors point to messages that, if the jury believes them, cut through the public persona. One line, repeatedly cited in reporting, reads, "If he could just go away, life would be so perfect." Now add the recent pressure point. The defense says the alleged drug source, Robert Crozier, has recanted and claims he didn't sell fentanyl.
But why was it that you remembered that in 2022, early 2022, you were selling oxycodone and not fentanyl?
Because everybody was scared of fentanyl in early 2022 and in 21. You know, it was all over the news, people were dying, and it was kind of hard to get, and people were scared of getting it. And like I testified, I had people that had prescriptions. I had my own prescription, and we sold those.
An argument the defense has used in bail litigation and is now colliding with the state's narrative in open court. Kouri Richins has been denied bail 3 times and remained jailed awaiting trial. She also faces multiple financial crime charges tied to alleged fraud and forgery. Before the jury ever hears about fentanyl, prosecutors want them to notice something simpler, one the world could see publicly. Richins was a Park City area mom of 3 and a real estate businesswoman. After Eric Richins died, she stepped into a role that reads as sympathetic on its face. She self-published a children's book about losing a parent, Are You With Me? And spoke about grief like she'd become an accidental expert in it. Prosecutors argue the timing is the tell. Because, in their story, the book didn't follow a tragedy. It followed a homicide, who Eric Richins was, and why he deserves more than a headline. Eric Richins wasn't a plot device. He was a father, a son, a brother. Someone whose life had routines, relationships, and plans. That didn't include dying at home at 39. He also had health issues that now sit at the center of the courtroom fight. The defense has argued Eric dealt with Lyme disease and chronic pain, and had prescriptions for opioids, positioning him as someone vulnerable to an accidental overdose. The state, meanwhile, says those details are being used as camouflage, something deliberate. Hold on to that tension, because it becomes the lens jurors are asked to look through. For every piece of evidence, was Eric at risk or was Eric targeted? The private pressure prosecutors say was building. According to prosecutors' opening framing, reported in multiple outlets. Richins was carrying heavy debt and was desperate to keep up a lifestyle that looked successful from the outside. They argue Eric's death would unlock money and control, life insurance proceeds, and access to his estate at exactly the moment she needed it most. And here's where the warning signs start to form a pattern instead of a rumor. 1. Money problems that weren't just tight finances. Prosecutors have said Richins was deeply in debt, and that financial gain is the core motive. They'll prove at trial. When money is the motive, everything else, documents, signatures, policies, timelines, stops being background and starts being evidence.
Ronnie, run.
Okay, I'm getting all three.
Cheers, boys.
Yeah, come back in the corner with us. There we go.
Richard.
Richard.
Richard, yep.
Richard.
Look, Chachi's still going. Ron, prove it all.
Oh! You were an Afghanistan warrior.
You are an Afghanistan warrior.
2. Alleged deception that doesn't stay in one lane. Separate from the homicide case, court reporting has outlined additional charges filed in 2025 that include multiple counts of mortgage fraud, forgery, issuing bad checks, money laundering, and communications fraud allegations the prosecutors say show a broader pattern of financial misconduct. The defense will argue those charges are separate. The state will argue they reveal how far she was willing to go to keep the facade standing. The other man, thread prosecutors say, explains the urgency. The prosecution has referenced Richins being involved with another man while still married, and they point to messages and searches as part of a picture of someone planning a different life, one where Eric wasn't in it. That matters, prosecutors say, because it goes to intent. Not, I snapped, but I planned. A first incident that, if true, changes everything. Prosecutors allege that weeks before Eric died, he became violently ill after eating a sandwich they say was laced with fentanyl, an event they present as an attempted poisoning. Whether jurors believe that allegation is a major hinge point. It turns March 4th, 2022 into an escalation, not an outlier. The defense strategy, as reported, is to keep pulling the camera back to Eric's health and opioid exposure, prescribed pain medication, empty pill bottles, and the possibility of accidental overdose. And they'll fight to keep the jury from treating Richins' post-death public persona, the grief book, the interviews, as proof of anything criminal. The prosecution's case is built on a timeline they say shows attempt, escalation, fatal dose, not a sudden accident. February 14th, 22, Valentine's Day. Alleged attempt number 1. Eric eats a sandwich Kouri left for him. Prosecutors say he broke out in hives and blacked out, and they argue fentanyl was the cause. He survives. The state frames this as the moment the overdose cover story is tested without a death. February 11th, 2022. Alleged access. Investigators say Kouri obtained fentanyl pills through the family's housekeeper. That supply chain is disputed, but it's central to the state's "how did she get it?" theory. March 3rd to 4th, 2022. Fatal dose. Prosecutors say she spiked a cocktail, reported as a Moscow Mule, on March 3rd. And Eric is found dead on March 4th with about 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. Then comes the line prosecutors want the jury to hear as motive in plain language. If he could just go away, life would be so perfect. Remember this detail. It matters later. If jurors believe the Valentine's Day incident happened the way the state alleges, March 4th doesn't look like misfortune. It looks like attempt 2, refined. After Eric died, investigators didn't just ask, could this be an overdose? They pulled on 3 threads the state says don't belong in an accident: toxicology, digital behavior, and money. Toxicology comes first. Prosecutors say the fentanyl level was about 5 times lethal, and they argue it's consistent with deliberate administration. including via spiked drink rather than an accidental overdose, when paired with the surrounding evidence. That finding is why the death stops looking unexplainable and starts looking engineered. Then detectives work backward. The Valentine's Day episode matters because it's framed as escalation. An alleged first exposure, survival, then a fatal repeat. Next is access. Prosecutors say Kouri used the family's housekeeper to obtain fentanyl. The defense counters with the recent twist. Robert Crozier, described as the alleged source, later recanted and claimed he sold oxycodone, OxyContin, not fentanyl. If jurors doubt that pipeline, prosecutors must win with corroboration. Texts, searches, timelines, and finances, not one shaky witness. And that's the final thread, money. Additional fraud charges let the state argue motive and method. The defense says it's prejudice. The jury decides whether it's patent or pile-on. On February 23, 2026, the story stops being rumor and becomes record. In opening statements, prosecutors tell jurors they're looking at a money motive dressed up as motherhood, a fentanyl-laced Moscow Mule, a practice run on Valentine's Day, and a public grief narrative that came after the fact. They argue Richins was buried in debt and stood to gain life insurance money and control of Eric's estate. So, in their framing, Eric wasn't the partner anymore. He was a barrier. The defense answers with one word: accident. They point to Eric's chronic pain and prescriptions, and they ask jurors to see an overdose risk that existed long before prosecutors ever entered the picture. They also emphasize what the state can't show: no eyewitness to a poisoning, no video of a drug being poured, and a case that leans heavily on inference. And then the credibility fight hits center stage. The housekeeper is expected to testify she sold fentanyl to Kouri, but the man prosecutors believe supplied that fentanyl, Robert Crozier, has recanted parts of his prior statements and now disputes the fentanyl claim. This is the case falling apart moment the defense wants, because if the jury stops trusting the pipeline, they start questioning everything attached to it. But the judge is repeatedly denied bail, pointing to other evidence. So the trial becomes a stress test. Can the state prove intent through the total picture? Texts, searches, finances, toxicology, even if one witness is messy? Or does messy become reasonable doubt? If the prosecution's story is true, this case isn't just about fentanyl. It's about entitlement, the belief that a person can be removed like an obstacle, and the world will accept whatever narrative is sold afterward. Notice the alleged pattern: pressure, deception, escalation. Prosecutors say Richins was drowning in debt. Then Eric dies, and a new public identity appears: grief author, devoted mom, healing spokesperson. But a brand isn't proof. The jury's job is to decide whether the evidence underneath that brand shows intent or coincidence. And that recent twist you flagged, it matters because credibility is oxygen in a murder trial. If jurors believe the fentanyl supply chain is contaminated by recantations, the state must win with what can't be walked back: toxicology, timelines, digital records, and money trails. The defense only needs one juror to say, "I don't know." But here's what doesn't change, no matter which side you believe: Eric Richins is gone. 3 children are growing up inside a case file. And the system is now forced to answer a hard question we see over and over, especially when the accused can perform normal, respectable, safe for the camera. How often do we mistake a role for a reality?